Warning: this episode contains references to extreme violence. Please use discretion when listening.
The past is never dead. It isn't even past. William Faulkner.
Down a winding road on the west side of the city of San Salvador, there's a peaceful little hideaway. The grounds are covered with palm trees, snake plants, and flowering bougainvilleas. It's a small hospital. The hospice, really, where cancer patients go to live out their last days. And it was here that Oscar Romero, a quiet man with an easy smile and some seriously enviable eyebrows, made his home. It's an odd choice. Oscar's not sick, and he's supposed to be living in the heart of downtown. Because Oscar is one of the most important people in El Salvador. He's the Archbishop, the highest-ranking priest in a country that's so Catholic, it's named after Jesus. And on a muggy March afternoon in 1980, Oscar Romero gathered a group of worshipers to the hospital's chapel to commemorate the life of a local grandmother. It's a ceremony he's done thousands of times. He steps up to the pulpit and performs the rituals of Mass. He blesses the wine, turning it into the blood of Christ. He prepares the Eucharist, the gift of the flesh. Outside, a red Volkswagen has pulled up to the entrance of the church. There are two men in the car. There's no way to know if Oscar saw them. But the street is only about 40 paces away from the pulpit. I think he must have seen them. Oscar raises a chalice high above his head, lifting it up to God. And mid-sentence, he's shot with a single bullet through the heart. Oscar Romero died that day, killed by a .22 caliber bullet. The bullet fragmented inside of him, destroying everything it touched. It sent a message. Because Oscar's killing wasn't just an act of murder. It was an act of war. An attack against the Catholic Church itself, and in turn, the people of El Salvador. Oscar would go on to become one of the world's most beloved saints. There's even a statue of him in Westminster Abbey, next to a statue of Martin Luther King. But to become that saint, Oscar had to sacrifice his life. His death marked the start of one of the darkest times in Salvadoran history, the Civil War. A war that would leave more than 75,000 people dead and send 1 million more across the globe, fleeing the violence. My family includes both, those that fled and those that died. When I started working on this story, I wanted to find out what really happened to Oscar Romero, who was responsible for his murder and all of the violence that followed. And to find out if the same forces that killed Oscar Romero were the ones that brought death to my family's doorstep. I'm Jasmine Romero, and this is Sacred Scandal Season 3, Nation of Saints. This is Episode 1, Oscar. Okay, let's get one thing out of the way. My name is Romero, but I am not related to Oscar Romero. I think. I'm pretty sure. Well, I asked my parents, and they're pretty sure, but I guess it's possible. Romero is an extremely common name in El Salvador. In 1981, my parents fled from El Salvador with my 3 older sisters to Los Angeles. Los Angeles has the largest population of Salvadorans of any place outside of El Salvador. It's also where I was born. I grew up going to MacArthur Park on Saturdays to watch my dad play soccer. The field would be lined with other immigrant families like mine, eating elotes and trying to start over. But the ghost of Oscar Romero was everywhere. There's a statue of him in that same park. And just up the street is a clinic named after him. Los Angeles is covered in murals of his face. But in my family, Oscar Romero really wasn't a topic of discussion.
Central America has been transformational because of the politics.
Yeah.
A few years ago, I went to this event in LA. There was a Salvadoran comedian with this big tattoo on her arm, and the host complimented her on it.
Her arm has got the most beautiful tattoo I have ever seen in my life, and it is of El Arzobispo Arnulfo Romero on her arm.
They started talking about the war and the meaning of Oscar Romero's life, and I remember feeling this embarrassment wash over me. These 2 strangers knew more about the history of my family's homeland than I did. My parents never really talked much about El Salvador, or the reasons why they left. Growing up, we were so concerned with surviving the present, there wasn't much room to consider the past. But I also had never really made the effort to ask, what horrors did my family experience that made them leave a place that they truly love? Who was the man on those murals? And if I really wanted the answers, I knew where I needed to go. So it's 1:40 in the morning. I'm at JFK. And I'm waiting to board my flight. My parents are going to pick me up when I get there, and I'm very sleepy. A few years ago, my parents shocked the entire family by moving back to El Salvador to retire. They used their life's savings to build a little house in their hometown, San Miguel.
Bienvenidos a El Salvador. Hemos llegado a tiempo. Pronto llegará el momento de bajar del avión.
I've been to El Salvador a handful of times, mostly when I was a kid. But 10 years have passed since my last visit. Looking around the plane, everyone's faces look like mine. But I still feel like an outsider, stepping into a world that doesn't belong to me. I grabbed my bags and headed out into the humid air to look for my parents. They were thrilled I was coming, even if it was for work.
Hola. Buenos días. Hi, Mama. Hello, Daddy. Con la camisa del hangar.
My dad was holding up a handwritten sign that said, Jasmine Romero, in capital letters. It was written inside of a pizza box, so I'm guessing they got hungry while they were waiting for me. My mom just hugged me for a long time. They both looked relaxed, which was nice and confusing. If you grew up with immigrant parents, you know what I mean.
La última vez que vine tenía...
As we walked to my dad's old pickup truck, my mom kept pointing out how nice and new things look.
Se siente el cambio de cómo era cuando
Antes el aeropuerto era diferente o
con menos comodidad. Ahora tiene mucho más modernidad y más grande.
The last time I landed in this airport 10 years ago, it had a different name.
Sí, porque antes se bajaba uno directo del avión.
It's now called the Oscar Arnulfo Romero International Airport, in honor of the dead Archbishop. It feels like everywhere you look, there are signs of change, of a new era. The terminal I flew into is only a year old, and there's new pavement on the sidewalks everywhere, new tar in the parking lot. Leaving the airport, we drive past a forest of palm trees, and tall billboards that welcome tourists to explore the new El Salvador. Ads for swanky resorts at Surf City Beach or day camps ziplining in the rainforest. But just past those billboards, there are rows and rows of little roadside shacks. People selling fresh coconuts, bags of water for $0.25, and souvenir machetes, the tool of choice for the country's working poor. El Salvador is still considered a developing nation, which just means that most of the population is living in poverty. The average Salvadoran makes $400 a month, and it's even less in more remote cities like San Miguel, where my family and Oscar Romero's family both come from. Poverty is something that both of our families knew very well. Oscar Romero was one of 8 kids, just like my dad. My mom is one of 9. Both of my parents were raised in homes where the floor wasn't made out of wood or tile. It was dirt. My dad didn't even own a pair of shoes until he was 15. All of this is on my mind as we make the long drive back to San Miguel to visit 2 of my tias, my aunts. There are constant reminders that this level of poverty is still very much a reality here in the new El Salvador.
Hola. ¿Y tú cómo te llamas? ¿Cómo?
Mira.
My tia rents a place on the outskirts of San Miguel with one of my cousins and her young son, whose name I finally learn is Ken. The house is made out of cement blocks with a tin roof, and there are extra pieces of tin leaned up against the house. She's saving up to install them over the patio. As we settle into the plastic chairs that my tia set out for us, a herd of cows passes by. Ken waves. My tia also takes care of my great aunt, my godmother, Tia Pasita, who I haven't seen since I was a little girl. My Tia Pasita is 89 years old, and she's so thin it feels like she'll snap if I hug her too hard. She's almost completely blind, and she's hard of hearing too. It takes a minute for her to recognize me, but when she does...
Usted Yasmin.
Sí.
Cuando fuimos a la iglesia ahí.
Sí.
She smiles a big, toothless grin and wraps her frail arms around me. She can't believe how big I've gotten. I put her hand on top of my head to show her how tall I am.
Y ahora estoy bien grande.
We all start talking, catching up, and it feels cozy and familiar.
Aquí me siento a su ladito, tía Paz.
Que no me dolía.
I snuggle in next to my Tia Paz, and we reminisce about the last time she saw me. I don't have any memory of these events, but the stories are familiar. The time I broke my wrist, the time I gave her my mom's purse as a present, walking to church together. Finally, I tell her that I'm here to learn about Oscar Romero.
Y tía, ¿usted recuerda cuando mataron a Monseñor Romero?
Ay, para allá
Sí.
se pone bastante atrás.
¿Qué recuerda de eso?
De muchas cosas, porque él era el señor obispo de ahí, de la iglesia.
Que entonces usted lo conoció.
Sí, nosotros platicábamos con él.
To my surprise, she starts talking about him like he's an old friend. She tells me that she remembers going to see him preach, which makes sense. For 23 years, Oscar Romero was the local priest in San Miguel, her priest. San Miguel is where he got his start in the Catholic Church. But I had no idea that my family actually knew him.
¿Y usted cómo era? ¿Cómo era el Monseñor Romero? ¿Era callado?
Era callado. El alto de Juan tenía alto.
Estaba alto.
Sí. Y bien respetable.
¿Sonreía mucho?
Sí. Allí, ¿quién no respetaba a ese padre?
She tells me that she remembers him being tall, like my dad, who's about 6'2". that he was the kind of priest that you could talk to about anything, that she often went to him for advice. I can hear the affection in her voice. It's a strange feeling to realize that my family was so close to such an important historical figure. It's like finding out that your dad played Little League with JFK. But being a local priest was the vast majority of Oscar's life. For most of his career, he just did the normal things that a parish priest does. Attend funerals, perform baptisms, maybe the occasional exorcism. Well, maybe not that last part. Who knows? In El Salvador, the local priest is an integral part of the community. He's who you go to when you're having a problem. And that's who Oscar Romero was in San Miguel. I keep asking my Tia Pasita questions, but she starts to get tired. As I'm taking her inside to rest, she mumbles something that makes my stomach turn.
Y el castigo que le dieron para que no estuviera allí, lo mandaron para San Salvador. Allá fue que hubo la ruina de él, pues.
What a punishment they gave him, she says. Going to the capital was his ruin. It was in the capital that he gave his last misa before being shot down. We'll be right back after this break. Being in this cozy house, it's easy to see how San Miguel could make you forget about the troubles of the world. It has a small-town quality to it, isolated from the politics of the capital. Maybe that's why some of the richest Salvadorans have estates out here. I didn't even know there was such a thing as rich Salvadorans when I was a kid. And now, I'm learning a lot about this hidden world that my parents never told me about. On the drive home, I asked my parents about something that I came across in my research. The 14 families. The 14 families, they say. Oh, they're the owners.
¿Los dueños de qué? De las ciudades, supuestamente, o los más millonarios. Eran dueños de tierras aquí.
It's what Salvadorans call la oligarquía, the oligarchy. The rich, land-owning families who have run the country since the late 1800s. These families are the terratenientes, the landowners that control most of the country's wealth. These families became fabulously wealthy by owning plantations that cultivated coffee, cotton, and corn. These families, they owned the stores and the goods that filled the stores and the land that the goods were grown on. Meanwhile, the campesinos who worked on those plantations lived in abject poverty.
Los salarios eran verdaderamente, increíblemente injustos.
This is Marisa de Martinez. She invited me to her home in the capital, and we spent an afternoon sitting in rocking chairs and talking about her work keeping Oscar Romero's legacy alive. She's an activist who protested the unfair treatment of the working class in the 70s, and she's the co-founder of the Oscar Romero Foundation. Because what happened to Oscar Romero and the history of the working class in El Salvador, they kind of go hand in hand.
Andaban por los 5 o 6 colones diarios y eso hacía pues que la población, sobre todo campesina, que en esa época era mayoritaria, vivieran en una pobreza insultante.
In the 1970s, when Oscar Romero was serving in San Miguel, the vast majority of the country lived this way, in an insulting poverty. Campesinos made less than $1 a day, and most families suffered from malnutrition, including mine. My great-grandmother, who helped raise me, she had 14 kids. Only 6 of them survived past 6 months. That's the kind of malnutrition we're talking about here. And for many families, the only option to survive was to buy things on credit. Credit that they got from their own bosses, the plantation owners.
Le daban crédito a aquellos que estaban anotados. A mí me impresionaba ver las filas de gente el día que pagaban en la hacienda, las filas de gente frente a la tienda pagando la deuda. Les quedaban al final unos 15 colones. Entonces era una vuelta de no salir de eso, ¿verdad?
It was a never-ending cycle. Most campesinos never learned to read because there were no schools, and so neither did their children. They lived at the mercy of the plantation owners for generations.
Lo que vi fue eso, lo que significa una pobreza causada por la injusticia.
And these rich, oligarchic families, they didn't just control the country's wealth. They were also deeply involved in the Catholic Church. By involved, I mean controlling. Now, the relationship between the wealthy and the Catholic Church didn't start in El Salvador. They've been intertwined since the first gold bar was delivered to Vatican City. But the relationship in El Salvador was particularly tight. It was a well-oiled machine. The country's rich would provide lavish donations to the church. And in return, the church would turn a blind eye to the systemic injustice. Priests would tell the poor, "Your reward is waiting for you in heaven." But in the 70s, some priests dared to break this protocol. That's after the break. Padre Benito Tovar is one of the priests who dared to step out of the established oligarchy-church relationship. I met him on a sweltering afternoon at his parish in Montserrat, a suburb in the hills around San Salvador.
¿Ya los atienden a usted? Sí, mucho gusto.
Mucho gusto.
He's about 80 years old, with a thin sheet of white hair and a twinkle in his eye. He invites me and my fixer Roberto into his cramped office in the back of the church. On his desk is a picture of him as a young man, smiling, next to a somber Oscar Romero.
¿Este es usted?
Era. Hoy ya no.
It's 90 degrees, with 60% humidity. I've already sweat through 2 shirts. But Padre Tovar, he seems totally unfazed by the heat. He offers me and Roberto some ice water as we settle in. Roberto asks him, "Don't you need some water?" But Padre Tovar just smiles.
No, es que yo no tomo agua.
¿Qué toma?
Coca-Cola.
Yeah, the old man's got swag. Anyway, when Padre Tovar became a priest in the early 70s, the church was still doing what it had been doing since the Spaniards landed on the shores of a place called Cuscatlan and decided to rename it after Jesus, keeping their pact with the rich and the poor in their place.
Los campesinos por allá, cada quien en su lugar, y los ricos, por otro lado, viviendo su historia.
And this is where Oscar Romero comes back into the picture. Because while Maite Paz might remember him as a man who knew the troubles of the poor, he did not have that reputation among the country's elites.
Era muy conocido y estimado entre la gente de plata de San Miguel y algunos de San Salvador.
For the rich families in San Miguel, Oscar was the ideal priest. Quiet, shy, happy to baptize their babies and enjoy a good carne asada with them afterwards.
Él era muy espiritualista en el sentido negativo de la palabra, ¿va? Solo oración, hablar de la Virgen María, no cosas malas, pues, ¿verdad? Pero una fe sin dimensión humana, sin dimensión política, sin dimensión sacerdotal, etcétera, ¿verdad?
Oscar was regarded as a gentle bookworm. And this unassuming nature, it got him far. He quietly rose through the ranks from deacon to priest to bishop of San Miguel, far from the politics of the capital. If he disagreed with the elite's business practices, he didn't share it out loud. Maybe he wrote about it in his journal. Maybe he prayed on it. But Oscar's easy life in San Miguel would soon get flipped upside down. In 1977, Oscar's boss, a man who had served as Archbishop in El Salvador for 38 years, decided to resign. But who would be next? The church and the oligarchy came together to handpick the country's next top priest. The obvious and expected candidate was the auxiliary archbishop, who had been second in command. But to everyone's surprise, the Vatican announced that Oscar Romero would take the position. The nation turned their eyes to this quiet priest from the East.
Los de arriba ven las conveniencias, digamos, de fe o religiosa en la iglesia, pero son conveniencias políticas al final, ¿verdad?
It was a politically convenient move. Oscar was known as a quiet local priest, the kind who built his career on staying away from controversy. In February of 1977, Oscar Romero was named Archbishop of El Salvador by Pope John Paul himself.
Entonces, eso fue la llegada de Monseñor Romero.
Oscar moves to the capital, his new parish, and starts leading Sunday Mass in the largest cathedral in the country. The rich pat themselves on the back for assigning a priest that they believe will watch over their interests for decades to come. Here's Marissa again.
La oligarquía le aplaude porque no nombraron al que se suponía debía asumir el arzobispado.
But Oscar was stepping into a hornet's nest. There had been unrest brewing in the capital and several protests led by campesino groups. People were unionizing, demanding better wages. The military government's response had not been pretty.
Desgraciadamente en esa época, cuando salían en sus marchas solicitando pacíficamente que a los campesinos, a los cortadores de café, además de darles un cucharón de frijol, 2 tortillas, les aumentaran, 3, 4 onzas de queso y un huevo. Eran ametrallados aquí en San Salvador por la Guardia Nacional.
Marisa says that the campesinos would organize marches in the capital, asking for better wages, and that those protests regularly ended with the military shooting directly into the crowd. And when the protests didn't stop, the military started going after the leaders of the movements. People started disappearing. Oscar Romero had a habit of going out into his congregation after Mass on Sundays. He wanted to get to know the people of his flock, the way that he had in San Miguel. But here, in the capital, people were coming to him with names. The names of sons, brothers, mothers, who had disappeared or been taken. Oscar had gone from baptizing babies to having to face the cries of mourning mothers. In the span of a few years, Oscar transformed from a quiet bookworm into a champion for the poor. 3 years after his arrival to the capital, he stood before his congregation as a changed man. Not a puppet, but a priest with a message.
Hermanos, son de nuestro mismo pueblo. Matan a sus mismos hermanos campesinos. Y ante una orden de matar que dé un hombre, debe de prevalecer la ley de Dios que dice no matar.
He gave a speech that cemented his legacy. It's a speech that's the Salvadoran equivalent of Martin Luther King's I Have a Dream speech.
Ningún soldado está obligado a obedecer una orden contra la ley de Dios.
Oscar was issuing a warning to the rich that he would not be in their pockets.
Nadie tiene que cumplirla.
The speech would be the landmark of his career. In it, he tells the government soldiers to disobey the orders of their commanders, to stop the repression against their own people, and follow God's most basic command: thou shalt not kill.
En nombre de Dios, pues, y en nombre de este sufrido pueblo, cuyos lamentos suben hasta el cielo cada día más tumultuosos, les suplico, les ruego, les ordeno en nombre de Dios, cese la represión.
It's the last homily he ever gave. The very next day, before Oscar could give communion, he was shot in the heart, murdered at his own pulpit. But Oscar was just the beginning of a domino effect, one that brought us to the new El Salvador we have today.
El Salvador's president, Nayib Bukele, has won re-election today in a resounding victory that has essentially wiped out the opposition.
Over the next 11 episodes, we're going to cover one of the bloodiest chapters in history, one that includes government cover-ups.
It was just outrageous that the nuns would have guns and would have exchanged fire.
A school for dictators.
Every time there was a heinous killing in El Salvador, there was always somebody that was a past graduate of the School of America.
And one of the biggest massacres to ever occur in the Americas.
The security forces in El Salvador have been responsible for the deaths of thousands and thousands of young people. Are we really going to send military advisors in there to be part of that type of machinery?
But I'll also tell you the story of one family, mine. Because on this journey, I discovered things about my family that still haunt us today.
Mom, what happened to your sister Margarita?
Well, they said that they took her. And the next day she was already dead. That she was killed. She was killed. Y fue cuando ya me informaron de que a ella la habían matado. Yo ya no la volví a ver jamás.
That's this season on Nation of Saints. Sacred Scandal, Nation of Saints is a production of AHA Podcasts in partnership with iHeart's My Cultura podcast network and is hosted and written by me, Jasmine Romero. Produced by Jasmine Romero with help from Jorge Just, Reynolds Gutierrez, and Alvaro Cespedes. Research and reporting by Jasmine Romero. Edited by Zaire Quevedo, Jorge Just, and Rose Reed. Nation of Saints was recorded in New York City at the Relic Room with engineering by Sam Baer. Mixing and sound design by Pachi Quiñones. Original music by Golden Minds, Darko and Aime, based on Patrick Hart's original composition. Fact-checking by Erendira Aquino Ayala. Executive producers are Carmen Graterol, Isaac Lee, Rose Reed, and Nando Villa. Our executive producers at iHeart are Giselle Bances and Arlene Santana. Sacred Scandal was created by Melanie Bartley and Paula Barros. Special thanks to Roberto Valencia, Matt Eisenbrandt, Saeed Tijan Thomas, Alice Wilder, Sofia Palitza Carr, Eric Mennel, Peter Bresnan, and Rima Kreis. The recording at the top of the episode is from Latino USA and provided courtesy of Futuro Studios. This episode is dedicated to my tia Pasita, who passed in 2024. For more podcasts, go to the iHeartRadio app or wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts.